This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's time for Faith Under Fire, the Family Life News feature that gives voice to religious battlegrounds. This week, literal battlegrounds, violence and threats against congregations. I'm Greg Gillespie, and today we talk with Ariel Del Turco, who leads the Center for Religious Liberty, which has published a report on the violence facing churches. Across 6 years, those numbers have expanded. Ariel, what are the trends you're seeing from this latest report?
Yeah, Family Research Council has been studying what we call acts of hostility against churches over the past 6 years. So that includes vandalism, bomb threats, arson, gun-related incidents, and really any type of crime that takes place on church property. Over those 6 years, we've sadly seen a huge increase in the amount of acts of hostility that are being committed against churches in the United States. Our numbers most recently from last year in 2023, we identified 436 acts of hostility against churches, and that was more than double the previous year. So we're seeing a sharp increase in recent years, and we think that's very concerning for anyone who cares about religious freedom.
On one level, 400 compared to the number of worship services that happen week by week, you're safe going to churches, but at the same time, if the rate of violence has doubled in the last year, that really is something that people need to be attentive to. What's been the reaction to your research?
I think people are very surprised to see this. We don't see it covered in the news media a whole lot, and I think that's partly because it doesn't fit some of the mainstream media's narratives that they want to push out. They might want to focus on other minorities, other religious groups, other non-religious groups, and they just really overlook some of the rising hostility that's taking place against Christianity. And you're exactly right that these numbers aren't earth-shattering. However, they really represent the tip of the iceberg. These are just the acts that are publicly recorded in news or police reports that are publicly available. So we think this represents a much larger problem underneath the surface.
So these incidents that you are counting are the ones that are acts of violence. Law enforcement gets involved. That is separate from anybody that comes in and, gets into a shouting match or anything. But is there a trend on what has triggered this big spike in threats and hostility against churches? Obviously, each situation is unique and separate, but are there trends that we can picture and connect those dots?
Yeah, it's hard to totally quantify what's happening in the hearts of men in these situations. However, we do notice certain trends. We notice politically that there seems to be some political motivation, especially around the issue of abortion. So after the Supreme Court leaked its Dobbs decision, which of course was eventually released and overturned Roe v. Wade, which is amazing, we saw a spike in violence against churches, not only generally, but specifically violence that had to do with abortion. There would be nasty threats written on the front of church buildings, talking about the church's pro-life stance, blaming the church for supposedly stripping away women's rights. That was a big issue. And even this year, or last year, during the November elections in Ohio, which saw the Issue 1 ballot initiative, which sadly did pass and did enshrine some sort of right to abortion in the Ohio Constitution. We saw a lot of vandalism of churches that had pro-life signs, that were openly pro-life. So we do see politics motivating these acts sometimes, but I think on a larger scale, it's just a collapse of societal respect for churches that is enabling this rise in vandalism against churches. I don't think we would have seen this on this scale a few decades ago even, and I think it goes to show where our culture is, where we're living in an increasingly secular society that doesn't understand religion and doesn't, therefore, respect religion. And the fact that people can walk past a church and throw a brick in a stained glass window at minimum, or behead statues outside of churches, or worse, set a church on fire. The churches have really become a platform for people to express their rage, and I think that's really dangerous.
In some ways, again, this is a political or a cultural leaning, theological leaning question. Shouldn't all churches speak out against all violence against all churches?
This is actually an issue that can unify churches along denominations, across the political spectrum. All Christians and all people of faith should be able to say that it's totally unacceptable for these crimes to be occurring against Christians and against churches. We don't want any religious community to feel that they are being targeted in their community, that they are under threat, that their church is unwanted. I think this is an issue that transcends some of these political boundaries and even religious boundaries. This is something that I think all religious adherents can agree on.
Ariel Del Turco directs the Center for Religious Liberty, a ministry of the Family Research Council. Their report on threats and violence, the dangers for churches, is available on their website. We link to it from familylife.org. I'm Greg Gillespie. This is Faith Under Fire from Family Life News.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.